Hello everyone, my name is Vinod Kumar. I am a PhD student in English at Ashoka University, and I'm going to present a paper on what I have termed or titled as Sexless Bachelors, Monogamous Couples, and Promiscuous Kings in Ancient India. So, what am I going to do in this presentation is to talk about two texts, the Manav-Dharma Shastra and the Arthashastra. And I will tell you a little bit more about these two texts in a little while. I will analyze in my presentation how bodies and desire are talked about in these two texts. And based on that analysis, I will make a proposition towards the end that I would like you to respond to. If you look at my title, you will notice that there is something heretic there, something that does not quite square with what we know about sex in ancient India. Sexless bachelors, monogamous couples. I mean, what is wrong with me? Have I not heard of the Kama Sutra, in which the Nagrika, a bachelor man, organizes elaborate evening for dance, music, and sexcapades with unmarried women, and teaches men and women tricks to have affairs outside their marriage? Then why am I saying that unmarried men did not have sex and the couples lived a monogamous life in ancient India? And promiscuous kings, I say this is outright blasphemy. Aren't kings supposed to uphold the highest order of morality? And lest I should forget, there are scholars, two of my favorites like Wendy Doniger and Ruth Vanita, who show us that Indian texts and contexts are full of sexual imagery, sex and desire. They write that gender and sex roles are fluid in several ancient Indian texts. Then why do I think otherwise? What could I possibly mean by my title? I agree with all that the Kama Sutra has to offer and with what Doniga and Vanita tell us. But it is interesting that Vanita and Doniger also point out the silence and phobia that operate around sexual desire in ancient India. And it is this facets of the texts, representations if you'd like, that I want to focus on in my presentation. I want to do it by asking a simple question. What is spoken of sex, pleasure, and how is it spoken of in the Manav-Dharma Shastra and the Arthashastra? The Manav-Dharma Shastra and the Arthashastra were compiled about the same time as the Kama Sutra and are important sources for legal and social history in ancient India, and I thought it would be interesting to read how they talk about sex and pleasure. What I'm going to do then is close read these two texts. And the frame I'm using is that of Varna-Aśrama-Dharma. Now, this frame is kind of maybe we can also call it a theory that states that the life of an individual is divided into 4 stages, and there are laws and norms to govern them. They differ along the axis of caste and gender. I'm interested in the regulations that managed sexual desire and pleasure at each of these stages. And the first of this stage is the Brahmachari stage. Sexless bachelors. The word Brahmachari comes from 2 words, Brahman, which means the supreme reality, and Chari, which means one who roams. Hence the words together signify the person who is out in search of the supreme reality or embodies the knowledge of the Vedas. However, if you were to ask anyone on the street what brahmachari means, or to call anyone a brahmachari today, it would denote that the person is a virgin or abstaining from sex. Now, this transference of meaning is mostly because of the extreme austerity, the emotional, physical, and psychological restraint that young boys and men were subjected to at the brahmachari stage. The boys were sent for this regime, this restraint, at an early age. So, from the age of 5 for Brahmins, and it varied for different castes. And in my previous slides, I did mention these 4 castes. So, the age differed for all these castes. And by the way, it was only these stages of life were only designed or divined, if I may say, for the upper castes, the first 3 castes: Brahmin, Kshatriya, which is the warrior class, and Vaishya, which is the mercantile class. So this age at which these students were so-called were sent to study, they differed for all these 3 castes, and it was as early as 5 for Brahmins. But how was this austerity achieved? What was the daily routine in the life of a brahmachari, and how was his body and mind cultivated for austerity and sexual abstinence? The regime or daily routine comprised getting up at dawn, and I quote, "stand reciting the verses until the sun comes into view, and in the evening remain seated until Ursa Major, a particular constellation, becomes visible." End of quote. If the student fails to do it, he should be excluded like a Shudra, the lower caste, from all rites of the twice born, the upper caste. Next, that's just one part of it. Next, he should go into the wilderness and recite the Savitri Versa near the water, presumably before taking a bath. Every day, and I quote, he should fetch a pot of water, flowers, cow dung, loose soil, grass, and beg for food. End of quote. He should also fetch firewood, stack it, and kindle the fire on a daily basis. So, by the way, whatever activities I'm enumerating, these are part of his everyday activity. And after doing all these physical tasks, he is also to be instructed in rote learning and lessons on the Vedas. And he is also obliged to obey all that his teacher commands him. At night, after all the work, he should go off to sleep on the floor. It's part of his abstinence or mortifying his body. This physical labor coincides with a psychological and physical discipline. Manu stipulates that a learned man should strive hard to control his senses. Hence, the student is obliged to restrain all his desires except the chaste ones. He is expected to feel neither elation nor revulsion at hearing, touching, seeing, eating, or smelling anything. And I quote, he should avoid honey, meat, perfumes, garlands, savory foods, women, all foods that have turned sour, rubbing oil on his body, putting collyrium in the eyes, lust, using footwear or umbrella, dancing, singing, looking at and touching women. End of quote. And if this were not enough, he is also directed to sleep alone and never ejaculate his semen. For when he voluntarily ejaculates, the student, when he voluntarily ejaculates, he breaks his vow. End of quote. Clearly, the student or the brahmachari was put through a strict discipline. He was forbidden from any grooming acts and deprived of sexual desire and pleasure. And to what end? Why the denial of pleasure or sexual desire is at the center of the Brahmachari regime? What is at stake for society in sacrificing a young boy's desire and pleasure? We may have our conclusions, but for me, the injunction or the regime is oppressive of the body and the mind. Monogamous couples. Now, once the student graduated from the Brahmachari stage, the Grihastha stage was one of the two paths open to them. Now, the Grihastha stage means the householder stage. Traditionally, this was the only stage permitting sex and pleasure to an individual. The householder was advised to choose a fitting woman, get married, and have sex only with her. However, if a married couple thought that marriage gave them a license to have sex whenever they wanted, they were mistaken. In other words, there was an elaborate regime regulating their sexual activities. For instance, the married couple could have sex during even nights, but they had to restrain themselves on odd nights, no matter how aroused they were. This restraint is explained as the science behind the conception of a male or a female child, but it is also a strategy to regulate pleasure and sex in marriage. Manu even enters the privacy of the married couple's bedroom and forbids them from making noises while sexually excited. Manu is the mythical creator of the Untitled Chapter, and Kautilya, who is the supposed author or writer of the Arthashastra, he also gives similar advice and forbids men and women from making indecent movement of their limbs or secretly engaging in lewd conversation while intending to have sex. I mean, I don't know what they were thinking. Further, the Shastras, these are texts that they form a specialized body of knowledge on certain subjects. No? And the Arthashastra and the Manadharma Shastra are also Shastras. I mean, I'm sure the title makes it clear. They also impose injunctions on everyday activities to police pleasure and sexual desire in a married couple's life. For example, the householder is advised not to look at his wife while she is dressing up, nor should he look at any naked woman. And men are not allowed to wear a single garment while having a meal or bathing, nor should they sleep naked, lest it should incite passion in the observer. Monogamy here, therefore, not only signifies an injunction against extramarital sex, but also suggests life as a whole at the Grihastha stage. It signifies a narrative, a regime perhaps, that necessitated sex for procreation, followed by the responsibility of bringing up children and then renouncing the household, the society, for an ascetic regime. Now, the life at the, I'm not going to delve into much detail for the later two stages, but the life was equally harsh, if not less or more. I would say it was more. For the people who moved on to the next two stages of life, wherein they were asked to renounce everything and live in the forest and afterwards move about, live in complete isolation and austerity. And sex was a big no for all those two stages. So now I'm finally going to focus on Promiscuous Kings. The person of royal lineage, particularly a prince or king, is not subjected to strict sexual laws like the sexless bachelors and the monogamous couples. A prince is obligated to undergo training into the Vedas, like anybody for that matter, of anybody from the upper caste. But Kautilya advises that his character, the character of the prince, should be hardened by testing him against sexual vices under the supervision of a specialist. So, in other words, he is to be indulged in pleasure in sex, unlike other people from other castes, other upper two castes. Similarly, a king, while living the life of a householder, has the liberty to pursue sensory and sexual pleasures without any formal restraint, except that he should use reason when immersing himself into the world of sexual desire. He is permitted to have a harem and special rooms for pleasure. For instance, Manu advises him to spend his afternoon and evening among women servants in scented ambience and rooms furnished with all comforts that seem very similar to the Kama Sutra's advice to the man about town. Furthermore, neither Manu nor Kautilya commands the king to turn into a hermit or ascetic at a later stage in life, but he is to ensure that his subjects follow the laws specified for them in law books. Hence, kings and persons of the royal lineage are not subjected to the same laws as others and are always already promiscuous. The kings are promiscuous not only because they can freely choose to indulge themselves, but also because they can use sex as a weapon in the service of the kingdom. The king is advised to regard sex work as any other form of labor. He may recruit prostitutes, widows, female mendicants, and wandering ascetics, people who are on the or at the margins of the society, as spies to get the information from those who are perceived as potential threats to the kingdom. These marginalized groups are advised to use love-inducing spells and have sex with criminals to obtain intelligence in political affairs. Further, the state may also employ secret female agents, such as holy women, to sexually infatuate certain treacherous men and accuse them of sexual violence offense to arrest and persecute them. The king is also instructed to employ artists, singers, dancers, to please and lure chiefs of the confederacy of for various political ends. Hence, what we notice here is that the king eroticizes politics, to put it in Doniger's words, by using sex as a political apparatus or tool and having the bodies and the sexual labor of people of all classes at his disposal. Hence the promiscuous king. Thus, and this is my argument, and I would love to engage, I would love you to respond to it when we meet on 29th of June for tete-a-tete, rendezvous, conversations. So what I propose is that the laws governing sexual desire and pleasure are inconsistent and discriminatory in the Manusmriti and the Arthashastra. In the Manav-Dharma Shastra, in the Arthashastra, sex and pleasure are treated as danger desire. The laws in these two texts vehemently regulate the bodies. The king and the people of the royal class, however, are permitted to enjoy sex as a recreational activity or use it as a political sport and weapon, a privilege that is denied to most in the ancient Indian society. Thank you so much. This is all I have, and I look forward to having a conversation with you when we meet on the day of the symposium. Thank you.